Welcome back. So we've seen that according to Marx's view of human nature, humans are fulfilled only through their meaningful labor, their ability to actualize themselves in the world through the production of an object that's stamped with their unique personality. So when a human is alienated from their labor, then they're alienated from themselves, their humanity, and others. So what we want to talk about today is how capitalism alienates the worker from their labor. So of course we need to understand a little bit about how Marx defines capitalism. What is its defining characteristic? And it's all about the means of production, what is called capital. Capital is the means of the production. So for example, if I'm going to produce a shoe, then you divide that production into two parts. You divide it into the materials and the tools that are needed to produce the shoe, and then the actual laborer, the person, the cobbler who produces the shoe. So now imagine what happens is there's a division between who owns the means of production versus the laborer. Then you have a capitalist society. So a capitalist society happens, we're going to see later on when we talk about his theory of history, through a division between who possesses the capital, the means of production, versus those who actually use the means of production to produce. Once this happens, we have a division between two classes of people, the capitalists and the workers. So, which he calls the proletariat and the bourgeois, the city dwellers. The proletariat, therefore, are those who are the regular people who work for a wage that is paid to them by the person who holds all the jobs, the capitalist. So how does capitalism alienate? Well, it does it in four types of ways, okay? The first is it alienates the worker from their product, okay? In other words, the product that they produce is no longer their own because they're producing it for the owner. Second, it alienates them from their act of production. They have no say on what is produced, nor on how it is produced or designed. That is all in the hands of the capitalist owner of the company. And then also, it alienates them from their humanity. Because if no longer can I produce what I want to produce, the way I want to produce it, then what is produced is now no longer stamped with my unique personality. And so therefore what happens is that I no longer have this opportunity to fulfill myself in my product. I have no sense of fulfillment in the objective product that is produced, and therefore no sense of who I am as a human. I am now only a tool of the capitalist producer who does nothing. And then finally, it alienates me from other workers. Because whereas before I might have been working together in a group for some common goal, now as a wage worker, I'm in competition with them because I need to do a better job than they do in order to get the wage, in order to even get the job. And once I get the job, if I want to be promoted or anything like that, then again, I need to be compared with others and they become my enemy. So this is the essential idea behind alienation. It's the German word entfremdung, and entfremdung literally means to make an enemy of something. And so not only am I separated in this natural divide between what I am and what I want to be, but I am made an enemy into all the things which originally were mine and were my friends. I am isolated and in a hostile state with my very world and myself. So we're going to talk about in this video and in the two succeeding ones, 3 ways in which capitalism and capitalist does this. Right now we want to talk about what is called commodification. And this occurs simply by the fact that a capitalist economy is an exchange economy. Now, of course, other economies are exchange economies too, but the key here is the emphasis. Capitalism is exemplified, its essence is in exchange, and in monetary exchange of one essential unit called the commodity. And so what happens is that everything in the universe in a capitalist economy is made into this thing called a commodity, a thing to be bought and sold. And so in the first book of Capital, Marx's magnum opus, he talks about how commodities gain value. And value that is such that it can be an object to be bought and sold for money. So we see two aspects at use here. First, here's a conversion of the normal notion of value among humans that is involved in production to this unique thing called exchange value. But first, let's talk about value in its basic sense. We all have needs and wants and desires, and Marx is not concerned with telling us how to define that. It's all a subjective idea, a social idea. It's whatever we want. That's our need. Whatever, this can be involved in things like things we need or want for subsistence and continuing survival, for enjoyment, conveniences, it doesn't matter. These are things that we are striving to obtain. And therefore they have what we call a use value for us. And that use value comes specifically from the thing you have. For example, on my hand is a certain tool called a marker. And this marker is useful. But its use value comes from its specific characteristics as a marker. In other words, that I can use it to write on a whiteboard. So whoever produces the marker is producing something that involves a unique process by a unique individual with a unique plan that has specific qualities. Without those specific qualities, without the unique type of labor that goes into it, you wouldn't have this use value. Thus you see that the labor that goes into this is really the source of value for this. But the labor is unique to it, and therefore can't be separated from the laborer. And the laborer, after producing the marker, sees this is my work, and I can tell it's mine because of its specific qualities. Okay? Now that's before capitalism comes in. This is before mass production, industrialization comes in, where the market comes about through an impersonal process. But we'll be talking about that in our next video. The key here is to pretend that this was a mark made by a craftsman, someone who specializes in making markers. Now, if I produce it only to be used, then there it is. I might share it with other people. That will contribute to their teaching or other things or communication. But nonetheless, it hasn't gone out of the realm of use value. But let's say now I'm in an economy where I'm producing a surplus because I want to sell it. Well, now it has to have a use value, but it can't just be for use. Now I have to somehow have some way of trading this for another thing that I need. Therefore, it has to have what is called an exchange value. So now I want to compare this particular thing with what I want. Let's say it's this cup. And so now the question is, well, how do I exchange this for this in such a way that I get equal value for this? Let's just be really naive and say, in order for me to get something like this, I need two markers. So now I have two markers equal this. But they don't equal each other, do they? They're very different things. Their use is very different. So we can't compare them by means of use value, because use value isn't about measurement. It's about just what specific qualities these things have, and they're very different from each other. Well then, I have to find some common thing that they're both equal to, that they both have an equal amount of, that therefore makes two markers equivalent to one cup. Well, the only thing that's the candidate in all cases is labor. Both are the products of labor. But you notice what we have to do here is very interesting. we have to abstract from the type of labor that's done, because the type of labor that is done to make this particular cup is very different than the type of labor that's done to make this marker. What we're saying is that really it's the amount of labor that went into it. It's the only comparable thing. We say that it only takes half the amount of labor in our hypothetical situation to make this marker that it takes to make this particular cup. And so therefore it would require two of these things to have the same quantity, notice, not quality of labor, as this particular cup. And so thus we see what we've done here, in order to have exchange values, we have to have this homogeneous substance called labor in the abstract. And the only thing that's comparable is the amount of labor that went into it, because the types are very different. So we abstract from, divorce from, the particular qualities of the object. And now we have this abstract substance called exchange value that is only a measurement of the quantity of average labor that went into it. So, very important thing occurs here, doesn't it? Because now the capitalist is making things, needs workers to do this. They don't care about the worker as far as their specific qualities are concerned, because they only want to make commodities. And each commodity, like this pen or this cup, is just an embodiment of a quantity of labor. And that's the only calculation that's going to go into it. And so therefore what happens is the worker's labor becomes divorced from their specific characteristics. It becomes this abstract quantity of labor that's only being considered as an amount and not as a specific thing. And so therefore we see that the product of the commodity no longer is unique to the individual. Their labor, their active production, is no longer a unique thing. It's only this homogeneous quantity. And therefore their fulfillment of production goals is not the fulfillment of their personality, not the fulfillment of their specific qualitative skills that went into it, but just this abstract quantity of stuff that needs to be produced. So thus, what we see is their labor becomes a commodity itself. It becomes an amount to be bought or sold. Once I have this abstract quantity, then I can have money as the measure of it. And like Adam Smith, he agrees, money is just another commodity that just became the universal commodity by which I exchange for other commodities. And then it gets stamped. But the key here is this, is that this exchange value then is embodied in this specific commodity called money, and money becomes the value now. It becomes so embodied in money that people mistake the money for the exchange value itself and forget about labor as anything but just money. And so now the capitalist who hires the worker and is valuing their work does it solely by means of money, and so does the worker. And so therefore their value becomes an external thing, an object, a fetish, he calls it. Because he says this is what happens in tribes with totems and various magical objects. It's the society invests value in it, and it only has social value. But because it's not thought about in that way, that value becomes embodied in the thing itself, and the object becomes mistaken for the value itself, and we forget about the social reality of it. So that's what happens is I become a commodity, because my labor, which I am nothing but my labor and my activity and the products thereof, becomes a commodity, doesn't it? Payable by a wage. I become separated from my value, and it becomes completely embodied in this fetish called money. I become reduced to my monetary value. I become commodified. My work becomes this abstract exchange value. Everything becomes measured in that value because everything is exchanged and sold. As we've heard it said, everything has a price, and that value is completely embodied in this external object, which is different than me, just a simple thing called money. I become nothing but my money, and society then becomes nothing but a demand for me to show in the money.